I will call the meeting of the Madison Plan Commission of September 19th to order. First, we will hear from our technical facilitator. Jesse?
All right, welcome to our virtual Plan Commission meeting. We're going to cover a few basic items before beginning. If you lose the connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. To members and city staff members, if you are able, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you are able, please activate your video when you are speaking. Use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak or ask questions. Staff, click raise hand when you are asked a question. The chair will do their best to call on committee members in the order in which their hands are raised. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak, the name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. The clerk will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the commission, please send it to the email listed in today's agenda. Chair, the floor is yours.
Thank you. The first item on our agenda is public comment, and I don't believe we have any public comment. Is that correct, Heather? That's correct. Okay. Then we will move on to communications, disclosures, and recusals. Members of the body should make any required disclosures or recusals under the city's ethics code. Does anyone have any disclosures or recusals? Seeing no raised hands, we will go to the next item, which is minutes of the August 29th regular meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Seeing no raised hands, is there a motion to approve? Moved by Commissioner Cantrell. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Fernandez. We will come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion does pass unanimously. Next, schedule of meetings. Our next regular meeting is Monday, October 3rd, then October 24th, and in November, November 7th, and the 21st. And we do have a special meeting Thursday, September 29th, and that will be at 5 o'clock rather than our usual 5:30. We will now do our consent agenda. It is the custom of the Plan Commission to remove from the agenda those items on which the staff believes an application has had sufficient review to warrant approval with all of the conditions placed upon it by the various city departments, on which the applicant accepts those conditions, and there are no individuals who have registered to speak in opposition. These items are placed on our consent agenda along with any referrals, and they're addressed at the beginning of our meeting. Of the items before us today, the following are proposed for the consent agenda. And I will note that there are an unusually large number of referrals tonight due to a snafu in posting, the legal posting of several of our items. So the items proposed for our consent agenda are agenda items 2, 4, 5, and then the items for referral, agenda items 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17. Are there any commissioners who would like to request separation of any of those items? Seeing no raised hands, I will read the items into the record. Agenda item 2, Legistar 73473, authorizing the mayor and the city clerk to execute a lease with Patrick J. Baxter, trustee of the Patrick J. Baxter Revocable Trust, owner of the property located at 2301 West Beltline Highway, occupied by tenant Kaiser Ford for the use of a portion of the city-owned Cannonball Bike Path corridor, formerly a part of the Union Pacific Railroad corridor located at 2201 West Beltline Highway for parking lot improvements ancillary to the adjacent car dealership, impacting Alder Districts 10 and 14. Agenda item 4, Legistar 72784, approving the preliminary plat and final plat of the Village of Autumn Lake replat number 6 on property addressed as 2121 through 2157 Waterfall Way, 17th Alder District. Agenda item 5, Legistar 73186, adjacent to 2550 Woods Road, Town of Verona, consideration of a certified survey map within the city's extraterritorial jurisdiction to create 2 lots for open space. And then again, the items for referral are agenda items 6 through 17. Do we have a motion for to approve the consent agenda? Moved by Commissioner Cantrell. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Shepherd. I will open the public hearing. Since we do not have any registrants wishing to speak, I will close the public hearing. And I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion does pass unanimously. Okay, that leaves us then with one agenda item. Agenda item 3, Legistar 73648, Planning Division staff update on the Hawthorne Truax Neighborhood Plan. And who will be taking the lead on that from staff? Dan, is that you?
We have our project team here today.
Okay.
So myself as well as Linda Horvath and Brianna Collins. I think Brianna is going to start off the presentation. Brianna, do you want to share your screen or would you like me to?
Can you share your screen, please?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Can everybody see the presentation?
Yes.
Great.
Awesome. So great. We're talking about the Hawthorne Truax Neighborhood Plan, and we're doing a mid-project update for you guys. So generally the agenda follows the project background, issues and opportunity summary, shared values and draft concepts and recommendations and next steps. The plan focused on the, oh, sorry, Dan, one back. No worries. So the plan focuses generally on the area following East Washington Avenue and Highway 51 with Highway 30, and includes the bridges, golf course, Dane County Regional Airport, and Rindell Street as defining edges. And it includes like 935 acres of land. So now, sorry, thank you, Dan. Next slide. And some reasons to plan. So generally, this area will update the 2001 Carpenter, Hawthorne, Ridgeway, Sycamore, Truax neighborhood plan. So a lot of other neighborhoods in the last plan. And this will update 20 to 30-year-old data and explore new opportunities like BRT or bus rapid transit in the area. the Wisconsin DOT's upcoming redesign of Stoughton Road, or US 51, and recommendations in the neighboring Greater East Town Area Plan that was adopted not too long ago. And so also the city is growing and we are addressing some of those concerns and also those things that come with growth like housing and such. Next slide, please. So generally, during the phase one public engagement, we explored the community's issues and opportunities. And so we had a map and data books, explored a lot of data that we had in the area. We had an interactive commenting map on our website that folks could leave a comment on geographical locations in the area, shown in picture 2. We had 2 virtual meetings, a community partners group. So we work with folks in the area, just major partners that are connected to the community to get community feedback and also their point of view. We touched base and got feedback from the Hawthorne PTA, neighboring communities and neighborhood groups. And we did a lot of outreach at East Madison Community Center. We visited their food pantry, did some outreach there. And we did hosted some walking audits with the school and also adult walk later that day. Next slide, please. And so actually, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to my colleague, Linda.
Okay, thank you, Brianna. So we heard a number of different themes throughout the engagement process. One, probably the most often we heard, was around housing and the need to maintain affordability, and also concerns about displacement as new development occurs in this area. We heard people want a balance of affordable and market rate in new housing units. And then there are, some different thoughts around housing scale. Redevelopment opportunities are something that people were somewhat excited about. We know that that former Gardner Bakery or Bimbo Bakery site is planned for new housing already. There's also a pending proposal and discussion for the car dealership that's near State Highway 30 and East Washington Avenue. And then from Fair Oaks to Highway 51, folks have probably seen there are a number of vacant buildings there. And then there's the bowling alley, et cetera. Those sites that look like they could use some redevelopment opportunity. And traffic and pedestrian conflicts are also a major theme of this feedback that we've been hearing. Better crossings, need for more sidewalks where there aren't any right now, possibilities for some new rapid flashing beacons in certain locations, and then speed management is another big concern. There's been car racing on East Washington Avenue happening pretty regularly, and some other speeding areas. Next slide. Another big theme is that there's no there, and that really is referring to a lack of neighborhood restaurants, cafes, or retail, a lack of community gathering places, and then development enclosing park spaces, kind of that old way of developing parks, where parks are behind, in this case, behind houses and other buildings. Then also a lack of community events and activities. Another theme is neighborhood barriers separating residents. Of course, there are some major highways and other roadways that are separating the different neighborhood areas from each other. Childcare and community services is another big theme for folks in the area. And then the need for better access to employment. We continue on. Shared values are something we came up with. We heard, based on the feedback that I just went over, the summary there, folks want to grow mindfully in this area with housing to meet the different needs, welcome new development while also respecting the sense of place that's there now, reduce that isolation, improve access to programming activities and employment, improve the aesthetics of this area, wayfinding and amenities along those public corridors, be a green and environmentally friendly place. There's a fair amount of green space in this area, and Starkweather Creek, both branches go into this area and through it. And so folks want to respect those green spaces, build a sense of community and be welcoming to everybody. There's quite a bit of diversity in this area, people from different backgrounds, and people want to be respected and welcomed. And then improve, again, that access to services, employment, events, and activities. And I think now, Dan, we go to you.
Yes, thank you, Linda. So I'm going to talk briefly about our recommended land use changes as well as transportation, and then into the neighborhood and housing section. So I'm probably not going to talk through each of every change that we are recommending to our future land use map, but the changes are really centered on three major themes. The first is to encourage higher intensities of land use surrounding our future BRT stations. Those most notably at Fair Oaks and Wright Street, as well as a couple of others at Mendota and Rethke. So kind of in those vicinities, again, those higher intensity of uses to give transit or better transit access to more residents, incorporating greater amounts of missing middle and trying to get some greater mix of housing. So really that translates to a greater use of the low medium residential, which kind of spans the range from single family up to small multifamily buildings, but really kind of, I like to think about it as generally as kind of that townhome scale, and a shift from the general commercial to a mixed use. And I think a big reason that we're thinking about that is a lot of these areas that were formerly considered commercial now might be okay for residential. And generally there's the general commercial land use is pretty explicit that it's generally not appropriate for residential uses. So we want to say, are there areas that really would be okay with residential? I would go a little bit further, and this is kind of a comparison. I think one of the approaches that we took in this plan was not necessarily to think of resident or the mixed use districts as districts full of mixed use buildings. I think we approached it as really focusing on a mixture of uses where we'd allow some single use, possibly residential buildings to occur. And where we really wanted to see those kind of mixed use buildings with those active ground floors, we were really diligent and about indicating those. So we did that with, as you can kind of see, I'll grab cursor, there's a pen with these active ground floor areas, really around those BRT stations. So trying to get, again, some amenities to support riders, some interest on the street, but not needing to have ground floor commercial in every redevelopment through the phase. But you'll notice that some of those low medium residentials are going to transition back from those corridors. Again, trying to step down some of those intensities to move into the predominantly single family areas and kind of bridge some of those scales. A lot of times it's also just recognizing what is there and basically going in and recategorizing some of those as well. Some of the other changes that are occurring as well, the Dane County property here, changing from an institutional use, which was kind of reflecting its former use, to a residential. They have plans for a workforce housing or visions for a workforce housing development over time. There's kind of some uncertainty of how that actually happens. But these are kind of reflecting our general themes in the area, and kind of walk you through some of those, what those might look like on the ground. These are just some conceptual renderings showing some building forms that might work. The first view is at the Highway 30, the intersection between Rethke and Highway 30 on East Wash. A couple big ideas that we're seeing here is kind of the recognition is this frontage road really working the way we want it to? And can we envision a future where that goes away and allows that redevelopment to actually occur up to the street to really enhance that pedestrian character? So we're not having pedestrian-oriented buildings behind a street that you need to walk through. We believe that we can vacate that over time and provide local access with a new street connect, with a new access at that existing signalized 30 ramp. This area is predominantly in that 4 to 6 story scale. We think that would generally falls within the medium residential and the community mixed use land use categories, as well as you transition to the back of some of these deeper lots, transition to a townhome style or slightly lower scale as we're moving into the depth of the neighborhoods. The next is at Wright and Fair Oaks. This is basically the Beanbo proposal that was just moved forward with some similar developments across Fair Oaks. One of the things that we're also looking at here which is kind of a continuation of a recommendation from the previous plan, was the eventual acquisition of the 3 single-family lots on Lexington. Kind of getting to what some of the comments that Linda said, a lot of the open spaces in the area are really developed behind homes and they're hidden from public view. This is the most central public open space. And by over time, potentially acquiring those homes and incorporating that land into the open space, that open space can become more of a public asset. It also may solve some of the existing loading issues that the school has currently. And again, this is kind of what that might look like. As we shift to the Highway 51 intersection, again, we're maintaining a couple or recommending the continuation of a couple recommendations from the past plan, one of which is the extension of Schneedeman Street across East Washington into the south side, as well as actually extending it to the north into this is basically the Truax area of here, and meeting up with the existing, I don't recall the name of that street right there. It might be Grace. Actually, that's Graceland. That would really, we do think, kind of better link those neighborhoods. They were kind of developed independently as Truax history being base housing for the former military installation, and the South kind of developed independently. We think that might bring them together. This is kind of showing, again, some of that potential for the Dane County, where we'd envision some multifamily on Fair Oaks, or I'm sorry, Wright Street, transitioning to, again, some smaller scale townhomes, maintaining a portion of that as open space, potentially a plaza. Again, similar scales of redevelopment in this area. On the Highway 51, or I'm sorry, northeast of Highway 51, we are showing a potential new street through here. And this is kind of responding to some of the uncertainty that could occur with the Highway 51 construction. The previous illustrations that we have from DOT in their study in 2014, basically all of them removed access. All of these properties on 51 lost their access, and they were showing some different ways to provide access, typically using a cul-de-sac. What that did actually was took up a lot of space and didn't provide a lot of great access. We think it could be done better. This is showing one way of potentially having a more neighborhood-oriented street that does provide the ability to have a decent redevelopment on those sites if demolition does occur. Shifting to our transportation recommendations, again, those major themes are going to be support bus rapid transit as that comes online in 2024. Our approach that we're taking for Highway 51, since that study will occur after the adoption of this plan, is to establish a series of goals rather than specific designs. We heard a lot, again, as Linda mentioned, about sidewalks and pedestrian improvements, and also the potential for a couple new and reconstructed streets. Again, I mentioned before, a lot of the supporting BRT are kind of mixed over with the land use. So again, having those highest intensity near BRT stations and good pedestrian access and those active ground floors. For Highway 51, again, I think the goals that we mentioned, biggest first is comfortable and safe experience for bikes and pedestrians. Right now, I believe you have to cross something like 9 lanes of traffic from east to west. Use right turn, 2 throughs, 2 lefts, 2 inbounds, and another right. So it's just a lot of lanes. It's a very uncomfortable experience. And as we look at the designs, I think that needs to be weighed heavily. Thinking about maintaining a human scale of the intersection, you could certainly argue that it's right now well beyond a human scale, but if grade separations are needed, we need to think about how that changes the character of the place. We do believe that if there is grade separation, that Highway 51 should be sunk below the existing grade of East Washington to maintain that visual connectivity across the site. While a lot of our focus is on East Washington and Highway 51, I think we also need to recognize there are other very important connections. Anderson to the north being one that will be used by our BRT system. And again, think about that, how that links up with the small residential area at Onsgard. as well as Mendota, that's also important. And Lexington is actually a pretty important pedestrian connection, even though there's actually at this point no pedestrian infrastructure. We have heard that a lot of people in the area are trying to use Walmart. It has a grocery. It is a full service grocery, and there's no real way to walk over there. There's no sidewalks on Lexington or on Commercial Avenue on the other side. Certainly, and that would not be a comfortable crossing experience now. We do want to facilitate the continued use or redevelopment of these adjacent properties. Again, thinking about if DOT is going to acquire and demolish properties, we as a city want to make sure that they can be redeveloped and they're not just kind of leftover pieces that are going to sit around forever. And maintain some of these local street connections. As you can kind of see, this is MacArthur. That in the previous plans that was proposed for removing that connection, as well as Roland, again, very close. Really maintaining our local street network, we do believe is important for a variety of reasons. Sidewalks are a major need in the neighborhood. There are a lot of the areas developed outside the city, so it's come in without sidewalks. We do see priority needs around Lexington and Mendota Street. Lexington, of course, being the street that backs up to Hawthorne Elementary. And this is a kind of a great example. The path to Hawthorne, there is a sidewalk on the one side. We have a striped crossing, but there's no sidewalks that you're crossing from. So kids walking to school a lot of times don't have good pedestrian infrastructure so they can walk safely. Many of these streets will have rural to urban reconstructs coming in the years to come. And we've actually heard many of the neighborhood residents are supportive of adding sidewalks on those streets as they occur. And certainly we are too, as well as staff. And there's also a couple of street designs that we think that could be improved over time. Fair Oaks is kind of the best one that we see. It has about 7,000 cars per day using 44 feet of uninterrupted pavements. It's got a lane of parking on each side for single family homes. Just gets very little used. And that results in basically terraces that are substandard, and we will not plant trees in there because they will not support tree growth. So I like to think about that as we've taken a street named Fair Oaks and we've reduced it to the point where we won't plant trees on it. So thinking about how that could be re-envisioned to really support neighborhood growth, to really better match what the needs of the community are. We've come up with a couple concepts. Redevelop or reconstruction is still fairly distant in the future, but we do want to get people thinking about what it could be, how we expand the terraces to potentially have not only good tree growth, but also distributed green infrastructure, some stormwater terraces, how we think about how bike facilities could be used. Are there different ways of thinking that potentially shifting to an off-street path on the east side to take advantage of the tunnel underneath East Wash. Again, just thinking through those and getting some ideas out in front of the community. For neighborhoods and housing, of course, we want to encourage new affordable housing using our existing tools, the Affordable Housing Fund. We certainly want to help support Dane County with its Wright Street property and how that can eventually transition to a workforce housing project. We also want to make sure that residents are aware of and can participate in the Part 150 soundproofing. As you may know, that is related to the F-35s and the revised contours that are going to be coming. The map below, or the map below, shows the contours that were modeled in the EIS. As the Part 150 process moves forward, the county will be remodeling those based on revised assumptions of activity and better flight data. So we certainly want to make sure that the community is aware of those and takes advantage of any soundproofing funding that is available. And we also want to promote other existing housing programs, such as the tax abatements or the tax programs to help residents stay home. And at this point, I'm going to transition back over to Linda for the remaining sections.
Thank you, Dan. And if you don't mind, just I guess advancing the slides, I'll just use your screen. Okay.
Otherwise, I can stop whichever you prefer.
Actually, why don't I share? Hold on a second. Go for it. Okay. So, let's see. Can everybody see the screen? Economy and opportunity?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. All right, let me just do a quick change here. So our team drafted economic development recommendations based on conversations with community partners, our economic development leadership and staff, and recommendations from the nearby Greater Easttown Area Plan and feedback from that plan's engagement with Chamber of Commerce groups that represent businesses owned and operated by Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities. The recommendations that you show or that you see that are highlighted really, focused on resources to help existing businesses stay in the area, since we did hear concerns about displacement, and support for emerging local businesses through initiatives like a new business district or business association and a commercial rental assistance or guarantee program. There's also recommendations in the plan to help employees find and maintain employment, um, or to help people find and maintain employment by encouraging employers to offer childcare and to help youth and young adults find jobs, especially along the new bus rapid transit line that will be coming to the area and other transit corridors so they can better access those job opportunities. Another thing that we heard a lot about was the need for affordable childcare. And so our plan does include a recommendation to encourage employer-supported childcare and particularly more affordable childcare options. Um, and I will pop over to culture and character. Through our work on the plan, the Odana plan, and the Greater Easttown plan, we've heard repeatedly from those Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities that the mall areas, downtown, and other gathering places in the city are not welcoming and inclusive. And sometimes folks in these populations feel unsafe in these areas. And so, in response, this plan kind of builds upon what the Greater Easttown Area Plan recommends, which is using a community-based design process to make spaces that are going to feel more welcome and inclusive to people from diverse backgrounds. So that means really designing those public amenities in ways that will make them feel more welcoming, and also encouraging private developers to do the same. We also recommend fully implementing policies in that city public art framework, and those particularly that focus on making areas more welcoming to people with all backgrounds. And then support too for local artists to create murals in this area and other public art, and to set up their workshops in the area and possibly pop-up galleries in this neighborhood in vacant or transitional spaces. We've also heard repeatedly in this process, again, as mentioned before, that there aren't community events and activities really here. And so we want to encourage our partners that we're working with to host some of these types of things. We can help, the city can help by clarifying those processes for street use permits, and for amplification permits, and promote our neighborhood grant program and other grants and resources that can be offered through the city for these types of events and activities. In terms of green and resilient recommendations, we're focusing on expanding green space. We've heard again and again through feedback during the process that there isn't enough publicly accessible green space. One of the recommendations is to widen street terraces during street reconstructs to allow expansion of the tree canopy and installation of rain gardens. Another green and resilient focus is around stormwater management and coordinating with that the Starkweather Creek watershed project that's going on right now through city engineering. We want to be addressing issues such as the flooding at Lexington Avenue and US Highway 51 that is happening in large scale rain events. That's affecting people who are trying to walk through that intersection, but it's also affecting that business kind of park that's right over there and access to it. We're also recommending partnering with Dane County to improve access to its green space that you see in that area along Bridges Golf Course and the Starkweather Creek. And encouraging Madison College to increase the visibility of their recreation opportunities at the playfields that are off Wright Street, and also their indoor recreation facilities, some of which are also publicly accessible. Through our deeper dive engagement in neighborhood planning, we typically work with a team of community organizations, neighborhood groups, property owners, and other stakeholders. And this plan is no exception to that. As Brianna mentioned, we have a community partners team we've been working with. These teams help us connect with residents based on the relationships that they've built in the area. They help us connect with residents and gather the feedback that we seek. Through the engagement, we often hear a great deal about the need for community building and the expansion of services and other related things. With this plan in particular, we've heard a fair amount about the lack of youth-centered space and recreational facilities and programming. In response, the plan is recommending that new mixed-use development, you saw the concepts that Dan was showing you, and the increased focus on mixed use in this area. In those new mixed use developments that may occur over time, creating some youth gathering spaces that perhaps youth could help design and kind of call their own in those areas. We're also recommending East Madison Community Center and the Future Imagination Center also possibly provide youth-centered spaces. And some of these could also potentially be used as flex spaces for seniors and the programming and services that those folks enjoy. The new bridge, Madison, out at Warner Park Community Recreation Center and the Goodman Community Center serve seniors in this area, but those are located a little ways away. And often transportation to those spaces is difficult. A near-term opportunity for adding community space is being planned through that new housing that's proposed for the former Bimbo site. There are, I think, at least 3 community spaces planned for that site. And we've already talked a little bit with the developer about the potential for programming those spaces to meet the needs that we've heard so far during this process. Another recommendation is to work collaboratively with Hawthorne Elementary School and their community school site. And this would really be a responsibility of community partners to potentially provide some more programming and services there, and possibly through city resources and support that we offer through our community development office. A third important focus is exploring increasing the capacity of city-supported childcare in this area. We've been talking with our child services group about that possibility. And again, an emphasis would be on more affordable childcare and accessible childcare by public transit that's also important and something we've heard quite a bit from the public. This is a mid-range plan to be implemented over 10 to 15 years, but we can get started now. And in fact, we already have. The city can do some things and will have responsibility for quite a few of the recommendations in this plan, but we're also turning to community partners and other outside groups. You see on the screen some of the things we've begun as a city. The city has been working, or the city engineering group has been working on solving a problem with that East Washington Avenue tunnel, that the tunnel that runs under there has been flooding somewhat regularly during rain events. They've also been more regularly cleaning up the garbage and graffiti that's been occurring there. And finally, they're working on, I guess one of the pumps underneath is not working properly. They just discovered that last week. And so they'll explore some opportunities to fix that. Plus, they've also closed off a gated area that had been used quite a bit over time as kind of like a trash area. Our community or our public art group, Mary Rose Eckberg, you may know Mary Rose, she is working on coordinating a workshop for public art over at East Madison Community Center. This would be exploring opportunities for new public art in the neighborhood. Perhaps it could be murals or other types of public art that could be located in our neighborhood here. So working with those residents and others who are interested to explore those opportunities. And a third thing that the city's been working on is providing technical assistance for neighborhood capacity building, and more specifically, exploring how to restart potentially the Hawthorne Neighborhood Association. The alder there, Alder Abbas, has been looking at doing that, and we're working as staff with that effort as well. As far as community partners and near-term actions, again, some of the things, Hawthorne Elementary School as a community school, helping with that expansion. But then the walking school bus too is something that partners are working on right now, expanding that to go beyond just serving the Truax neighborhood to also serving Carpenter Ridgeway and Hawthorne neighborhoods and Mayfair as well. Another thing partners are expanding and we're working with them on is looking at the possibility of creating financial literacy workshops. There's a Dane County Credit Union in this area, and then also a new credit union, DuPaco Credit Union. And so Brianna has been talking with those credit unions, and some of our partners have as well. And a third thing from community partners is again exploring some additional community events and activities in this area. One thing that we can do as a city to help support that is also explore expanding things like our Carts in the Park program, Movies in the Park program to this area. And that's something we've had some conversations about as well. The initial draft recommendations that we showed you tonight, we have also presented those to the public more recently towards the end of August and into early September. And generally there's been positive support for the recommendations. One of the things that came through in particular was enthusiasm for new growth and development. While still there are concerns about displacement and maybe an increase in traffic, people feel like this area had been overlooked for a long time for new development and are excited about new things happening. Again, need for more activities and programming, and this is for kids of all ages. That kind of received a little bit more emphasis during this phase of the process than the first phase. As well, safety and drug use and need for more lighting received some emphasis this time around. More accessible green space again. And then barriers to housing, and this really folks lifted up rental history, security deposits. These are things that sometimes get in the way of people getting housing, and so we want to look at how we can break down some of these barriers. And a third thing is water quality concerns. That was emphasized quite a bit in the last couple of weeks. And this really was about that well 15 that's currently shut down, and water utility is exploring how to do something about the PFAS, which was discovered in well 15 and prevent that from contaminating it further so that well can be reopened. So next steps include visiting several more boards, committees, and commissions with this initial draft. Transportation Policy and Planning Board on October 10th, Community Development Authority on October 13th, or possibly November 14th, Community Development and Block Grant Committee on December 1st. And then doing a few more phase 2 meetings with this initial draft. Brianna's been working with the Latinx and Hmong communities on potentially creating focus groups. And those would potentially be at the East Madison Community Center. Dan's going to meet next week with the Hawthorne Parent Teacher Association. And then we'll be visiting the East Madison Community Center for their upcoming dinner on October 30th as well. In phase 3, we'll be refining the draft with any new public feedback and then going back out to the community for phase 3 public engagement with a complete draft plan starting in mid-November. We hope to have a final draft plan ready then early next year and have that introduced to the council sometime in January, and hopefully have the plan adopted as a part of the comprehensive plan in February or March. So now I will hop over to feedback and questions and turn it back over to Liddell.
Okay, first, I would like to have people ask questions that they might have about the plan. Are there questions about the plan? Commissioner Fernandez?
Thank you. I have a couple questions. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sometimes microphone problems. My first question is, what is the relationship of this plan to the sub-area plans? I'm assuming that this is earlier in the pipeline and that this is going to get superseded by a sub-area plan at some point in the future, but I just want to confirm that. And the other question is, do you know, well, I have several questions. Should I ask them one at a time?
Yeah, why don't you ask them one at a time? And Linda, can you unshare your screen for now during and you might have to pop it back up, but then people can see each other. Thank you. So I don't know who wants to take that question. Heather, it looks like you do. Could you please go ahead?
I can start, and then if others have more to add. So the new sub-area planning process, we're kicking that off late this year, but moving forward, we're always going to be dedicated to doing community development block grant plans separately from the larger sub-area plans. So this is really sort of the one exception that we talked about with the Plan Commission over the course of the last year and a half or more, as maintaining a separate set of planning processes really focused on areas where a majority of residents live with lower moderate incomes, and doing public engagement a little bit differently and deeper, and focusing on city initiatives that could be taken in the near term, really diving into a bit more detail than we envision the sub-area plans taking in the future.
Yeah, thank you. That really clarifies it for me. Do you know what the time frame is likely to be on the Highway 51 interchange? Has DOT given any indication, or do you have any ballpark idea of when that redevelopment is likely to happen, or the transportation?
Dan, go ahead, please.
So we are still kind of learning. I do know they have a PIM coming up, I believe, in October that we will be attending to kind of go. From what I've understood, I believe DOT is looking to complete its environmental documents in 2024, which apparently is a very fast process. I don't know what that means in terms of reconstruction or when it goes in the queue for funding. But it does appear to be moving faster than the typical projects.
Okay, thank you. I guess my last question is, do you have a ballpark estimate at build out of this plan, how many additional housing units would be in the area compared to the number that are there today? Is that a number that you have a sense of?
Linda, Dan? Dan, go ahead, please.
Sure. So I don't have that number directly in front of me. I think what we were looking at, but it's certainly something that we could put together. I do know we had some preliminary development estimates that we presented to the President's Work Group on Environmental Justice, trying to get a better understanding of what would likely be the development outcomes in areas that were impacted by the contours. But I could certainly look relatively quickly and see what I could find.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Shepherd.
Hi, yeah, a quick comment and then a question. One, it was a little disturbing to hear about the issues in terms of street lighting, that those issues are current. I know that that's not your priority right now, but it seems like somebody should address that. I mean, if we have issues with street lighting that's leading to crime and other related issues, that's something I don't think the city can wait for an entire plan to get developed. So that's just my first comment. My actual question is as it relates to Madison College. Full disclosure, I'm an employee of Madison College, but I do not represent or speak for the college. Have you been in any communication with the college regarding housing, or once again, developing housing or allowing the development of housing nearby that students could access?
Linda, please go ahead.
Yeah, so Madison College has been one of our more active community partners on our community partners team. And so Sylvia Ramirez is our contact there. And also Cody White has been involved. Housing, we were at Madison College talking to students, and let me tell you, housing was top on their mind, affordable housing located near the college. We also, Sylvia and Cody also made that clear that that was a need. And so as far as where that could actually be located, it's something we're looking at, especially since, as we say, we just a couple weeks ago heard it loud and clear again, and especially like we say from students. So it's something that we will need to follow up with the college on. And again, Cody and Sylvia are our main contacts. But if there are other folks you think we should be talking to as well, we would, welcome those contacts.
Yeah, no, Sylvia's great, so you're talking to the right person.
Mhm.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Did you have any further questions, Commissioner Shepherd? No, okay. Commissioner Cantrell.
My question is the Highway 51 project again. I was at a DOT meeting several years ago, actually, on that corridor, and they were pretty adamant that they wanted grade separated intersections at major streets. And I think the city was pushing back at that time to say, no, we don't want that. We want more of a, at grade intersections. It's these grade separated streets disconnect neighborhoods. And my question is, how does this DOT proposal affect the homeless shelter, the housing project that the city and the county are involved with just north of East Washington on Stoughton Road? Because that faces Stoughton Road, I think.
Dan, Linda, Heather, who wants to take that? Dan, go ahead, please.
Sure. So I think first speaking to the men's shelter, I believe that takes access from Bartillion. So it's not off, it's access via the Anderson connection and kind of up there, I believe. So that their access should be presented. One, and again, we haven't seen anything that has indicated to us that that would, have any impacts. We do know that if a property is acquired by DOT through this process, they would need to also facilitate a relocation. My understanding is, as you might be aware, locating a men's shelter might be challenging. DOT might take that into consideration in their designs because they would be responsible for finding a suitable location. But speaking to, the grade separated access, I think you bring up some very important concerns. And some of the limitations that we do have in this process is we haven't had anything to see yet. We haven't had any reaction to. We are working with the Department of Transport, the city's Department of Transportation and TE to kind of brainstorm some intersection concepts that might work. We want to certainly have a voice in those decisions and have a place at the table as those alternatives are being studied. But I think we certainly are looking at how do we make this the most pedestrian, the most connected, the best outcome. There might be, when we talk about a grade separation, it might be as simple as maybe one movement gets removed in grade separation, like a through movement, and just that might free up some time at the intersection where we can maybe go from 2 left turns to a single left turn, and when we start really kind of shrinking that intersection so it becomes much more pedestrian friendly. Again, we're going to work the best we can. Intersection design is not my forte. That's definitely a different technical skill set, but we're working very closely with TE and Department of Transportation to make sure that hopefully steering this thing in the direction the city's best interest.
Yeah, good. Obviously, this project is a distance out, but the city is moving quite quickly on the men's shelter. and spending millions and millions of dollars on that. So we need to make sure that's right rather than relocating it. And I would hope that the city obviously would be working with the state to see any type of concepts that they may have. But that intersection, I drive that almost every day, and in that corridor every day almost. So I'm very familiar with it. So this is a good plan. I'm glad you're moving forward on it. Thanks.
Thank you, Brad. Any other, or Commissioner Cantrell, any other questions?
No, not at this time. Thanks.
Thank you. Alder Heck.
Thank you. Just kind of a follow-up on Commissioner Cantrell's questions. I guess I don't really understand what the state's goals are with Highway 51. It sounds a little bit like they want to make a super highway and make traffic move more easily, more traffic maybe. I don't know, Dan, do you happen to know? Because it's a little bit confusing to understand how that one particular intersection is going to perhaps evolve if we don't know what they're up to.
Yeah, I would say I can't really answer that question because I haven't been in any meetings with state DOT yet. I think that's a great question, though. We do know what we know what was built to the north in DeForest for Highway 51. We are certainly familiar with some of the alternatives that were presented in the south in the Stoughton area, bypassing, to the extent of bypassing Stoughton's downtown. So certainly, what is their motivations? Is to create a parallel alternative to 39? That could be the case. I think where we sit now, we recognize that it is one of the city's more accident-prone intersections, and certainly least pedestrian-friendly intersections. So I think from our perspective, there certainly is absolutely room for improvement. I think our job in front of us is to make sure that that improvement happens in the direction that betters the city and not just betters traffic flow on 51 moving through the city.
Thanks. And I know you're not associated with Department of Transportation, but one more question. You mentioned the possibility of land acquisitions by the state. And, obviously that could throw a monkey wrench in some things related not just to what Commissioner Cantrell mentioned, but all sorts of things. And do you get the impression maybe that that's possible because of perhaps creating grade separations and things like that? And they're not necessarily looking to widen the highway substantially that you know of?
Give me a second. I'm going to pull up. I actually have a page in the map and data book that kind of shows the alternatives that were being considered in 2014, and I'll share that in just a second. That alternative looked at, I think, a pretty typical intersection design or interchange design, I would say, where you're kind of looking at a ramp. Pull that up really. Just trying to find the page. Hold on one second. And that's probably the easiest to talk through so when you can see those.
These are preliminary concepts that the state floated or that you floated?
These are concepts that the state floated. Can everybody see the page?
Yes.
Okay, so these are concepts that the state prepared when they're looking at this corridor in 2014. They may or may not reflect any sort of current thinking, but it was where the state left off last time they were looking at it. And so you can see the three alternatives, one from basically trying to maintain the corridor generally as current footprint with some small, well, I wouldn't necessarily call them small, but kind of the low impact, which kind of looked at changing some, reducing access from 51 in the immediate locations and some intersection geometry changes, but this is fully at grade. You can see by removing a lot of this access, their approach was to basically demo and acquire those properties, because if they don't have access, they don't have value. All those little X's represents buildings that would need to be demolished for those for these alternatives to be built. So the first one was, again, a fully at-grade intersection. The second one and the third one were grade separated with small kind of differences in how they approach it. So if these were built, there certainly could be significant property acquisitions. Again, we don't know if this represents their current thinking or not. There will be, I think, a PIM coming up, and we will have. There are also some technical advisory committees that the city's a part of. I'll be helping out with the city on that regards. Obviously, being involved in this process as well as the Northeast area plan coming up next. So that it could be significant. We don't know what it is at this point, though.
Okay, thank you. That's remains quite a variable. I'm going to switch topics, if I may, and talk about housing. I look at the future land area map and land usage map and see, it's great, increased density along East Wash in places that it certainly looks appropriate. But I also see that a fair number of those parcels are currently what look like single family dwellings, perhaps duplexes, and a lot of naturally occurring affordable housing that will potentially someday become denser housing. And I mean, I think that's probably some of the areas that you're most concerned about keeping affordability or and gentrification or displacement. And I wondered if in the plan there would be any language specifically about those areas or areas like that, rather than just saying we need to, make sure there's not displacement and here are some tools. I wondered if it could even get more specific, or perhaps you already have that idea that it could get specific about quite a few large number of parcels that would lose that naturally occurring affordable housing.
Go ahead, Dan, please.
Sure. I don't know if I need to raise my hand each time.
No,
but,
just, yeah.
okay.
Why don't you just keep your mic open and
Okay, I
because
can
I
mute
think
and
you're going to
unmute
take
it.
a lot of these.
Yeah, so yeah, absolutely. So a lot of those changes do occur on East Washington. And again, this is kind of one of our more unique sections. Although there are a couple on East Wash where we do have a kind of a concentration of some single family and some smaller apartment buildings. One of the things that we saw in those opportunities, particularly on the north side of East Wash, is those are extremely deep lots. And oftentimes they don't have developments on the backside. So I believe that's Ridgeway, the street to the north. So some of our thoughts were, certainly where there are certainly some opportunities for redevelopment on the East Washington side, but a lot of our focus was on changing some of the, our thoughts was, if we change some of the land use designations, do we provide more opportunity for infill development that doesn't require demolition on the northern half of those properties? Could we be more explicit about techniques to limit displacement? We probably could. It is kind of that catch-22 though, is like, how do we encourage significant increases in residential units surrounding these BRT, the areas where we really want to, without incurring some level of demolition. We do know that, as we mentioned, there is likely a development proposal coming forward on the car dealership site. We do know that there are some surprises, right? We do know that it sounds like there may be a redevelopment on the car wash that basically replaces it as is. There are some other opportunities, some clear opportunities that we're seeing in the previous plan that just haven't occurred because maybe the market wasn't there or the ownership or looking in different directions. But a lot of our goals is thinking about how we could really focus on some of those, maybe being a little more explicit that an ADU can happen inside an existing single family, what most people would consider a 2-unit. Kind of explaining that maybe that can go in an LMR and just kind of being a little more explicit about that. So, but certainly I think we could take steps in the document to really flesh out what strategies we have to minimize displacement through this plan.
Thanks. I started thinking, gosh, for particular blocks, you could have a recommendation that no net loss of affordable housing occur and things like that. But that's for another day. Thank you.
So one thing I can bring up one conversation that we've had in the neighborhood. There is certainly I would say there's kind of some people that really want to see that are, I would say, concerned about the impacts of additional affordable housing on the school. It's already an area that has a lot of free and reduced price lunches, and certainly when you kind of push that too far, the educational outcomes may suffer. So we have heard, do we need more affordable housing? Do we have enough? And certainly people see the housing pressures and want there to be additional affordable housing. So it is challenging. We do want to find that perfect balance. I wish we knew exactly what that was. But we will work to certainly look at how we can maintain the affordable housing that there is.
Thanks. I realize there are no easy answers to some of this.
Thank you, Alder Heck. Did you have any further questions?
No, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
If I could just jump in on that last one, I just wanted to add that, we face this not only in this area, also in South Madison, where we just recently finished a plan. I think that we do need to be thinking broadly about maintaining housing choices, including affordability within these areas, while not maybe maintaining every single building that's there today. And that may sound dramatic, but I think it's true. I think we, in this draft plan, exercise some restraint with regard to basically increasing planned densities. We really went a block or two from key transit stations rather than full swaths of blocks and blocks of land. But I do think that rezonings, along with cities' deep investment and affordability in this area, can maintain a really healthy mix of housing choices for all income levels, while maybe not over the course of 30, 40 years maintaining the exact existing housing stock that's there today.
And actually, I'm going to add one more thing. And actually, this is kind of going back to the development estimate question. Part of the reason we don't have that is because we were relatively broad, and we didn't expect, and we did not necessarily want major turnover in some of these blocks. We certainly didn't want to prevent necessarily good proposals coming forward. But particularly when we were shifting from like a low residential to an LMR, it was really to capitalize on those infill opportunities, and not necessarily, we're not going to expect to see a lot of demolition of single family to put in a duplex, for example. That really wouldn't work out from just a market perspective. But I did look back at what we have from the President's Work Group and just some development estimates on certain sites, and it looks like probably in the vicinity of 1,000 to 1,500 are the number of units that could occur on, I would say, those widely recognized redevelopment sites. So again, like that car lot, like Beambo, like some of the now vacant lots next to Visions along on the other side of 51. So it could have significant capacity, but if we just did like a per acre number, it would be significantly above that. But again, I don't believe all of those would redevelop, of course, in this plan.
Thank you, Dan and Heather. Alder Paulson.
Yeah, actually, I just had a little bit of information about the 51 studies.
Okay, please.
So the 51 corridor, the city did work on the South Stoughton Road revitalization. WISDOT was going to study this in 2017, but they ran out of money, so they punted it to the future, and they've picked this back up, and they're actually going to do it as two studies. There's a 51 North study, and the split point is 30, and so they're going to go from 30 north to the forest on 19, and that's the North study. And they're going 30 south to just a bit south of the just a bit south of the Beltline, and that's the South study. And they're going to run them concurrently. And they've just kind of started kicking this off, and they're very actively updating web pages. So the two studies, there are links to them in my Alder blog. If you want to check out my most recent blog post, there's a link to the two different study pages, and they're literally changing them. Because when I wrote that on Saturday, I said, look, they haven't scheduled the public information meeting. They have scheduled the public information meeting now. It's October 13th from 4 to 7 p.m. Out at Wisdot. They are explicit in saying on the South, the reason that they're doing this in kind of two halves was because they said they wanted to be able to be incorporate city recommendations. So the South study, they're explicitly saying we want to incorporate what was brought up in the Stoughton Road revitalization plan. I don't know like what they're thinking about for the at-grade or anything like that, but they're having a local and other officials advisory committee meeting next week. And so, you know, we're going to find out really quick some of what they're thinking, but it may be that they haven't got any new ideas of what they're doing this way. This study says that look, they're only going to do some planning alternatives and some environmental studies. They haven't scheduled construction, and somewhere in there they said maybe the end of the decade before they even start this. Whereas in like the I-90, 39, 94 study, they're at least saying, okay, well, we're going to start maybe construction in 28 on that corridor. So this one feels a little farther off. And the other thing that's a little confusing is if you just are searching for Wisdot website for what they're doing on 51, they are going to do some work at the East Wash 51 intersection this upcoming year. They're going to like just replace some concrete and do a little bit of minor twiddling of moving some things around. So you have to be careful when you're searching, because you'll find one study that says, here's the plan and here's the meetings that we're going to talk about for the construction we're doing this year. And then there's a bunch of stuff that's like, here's the stuff we might do in like 2030.
Okay.
So
Thank you, Alder, for sharing that. Thank you. Linda Horvath, you wanted to add something?
I'll just add something on the Highway 51 as well, which is that the public information meeting is scheduled for October 13th from 4 to 7 p.m. at their Southwest Regional Office, they call it, which is 2101 Wright Street. And the kind of project manager, Jeff Behrens, for the project has been in touch with the East Madison Community Center. He's going to be meeting with the assistant director there this week to talk more about public involvement, because the Truax community has expressed, you know, some concern and interest in wanting to have some good involvement, since their folks live right over there and are a little bit concerned about what this is going to mean for the community. People, as we have said, during this planning process, have already been very concerned about the existing barriers in the community that divide up this neighborhood. And so people don't want to see, further division by that facility, that Highway 51 facility, becoming even more large and inhumane, maybe you could call it. So that will, like we said, that meeting's coming up on the 13th, and there's been some involvement already by the community here, and will continue to be even more.
Thank you, Linda. Alder Heck.
Thank you. Just one more kind of comment or question on that subject of Highway 51. I know the city recently, I think we accepted, not just applied for federal grants, a federal grant to study exactly this, the highways, roads that have chopped up neighborhoods and reduced access. And it's kind of interesting that we have a pot of money for that, and at the same time, it seems like we might be making things worse on the state level. I don't know if I saw Heather's hand briefly go up. I didn't I didn't know if you knew anything about that, but obviously we likely aren't spending it on Highway 51.
Okay, thank you, Alder Heck, for that observation. Heather, did you have something you wanted to comment?
Sure, just quickly. So we haven't applied for that grant yet, but I believe we'll be focusing on Beltline crossings following the recently adopted South Madison plan. And so that's up next and due later this fall.
Okay. Thank you, Heather. I don't see any other hands raised. We do have a couple of specific questions that staff would like to hear thoughts of the Plan Commission about. The first one is general thoughts on transition from general commercial to fixed use future land use designations. So are Plan Commission members comfortable with the mix of uses approach in terms of what they're seeing in the plan, and also requirements for active ground floors? Commissioner Cantrell.
Well, I like what the staff has proposed on mixed use. And I think in most cases, and I don't think in all cases, active on ground floors would be necessary in this corridor, because I think some, all residential buildings could actually be appropriate in some of these redevelopment areas, but obviously immediately around the transit intersections, the transit stops, I think that active ground floor level is very appropriate. So I'm supportive of what staff is recommending.
Thank you, Commissioner Cantrell. Other comments on that particular question? Do people agree with what Commissioner Cantrell was saying? Okay, I'm seeing a couple of thumbs up. Okay, it sounds like people are in harmony with that. So thank you. And then the second question is, since this plan will be adopted prior to WSDOT, and we've had quite a bit of discussion about this, presenting alternatives for the Highway 51 project, do you agree with the approach focusing on goals rather than specifics? And does the Plan Commission have any other thoughts on how the impacted intersections should be designed? Commissioner Fernandez.
Yeah, I guess I would recommend that this plan be as specific as it can possibly be in that regard. And I know that that's probably more falls to traffic engineering than to planning. Long experience with DOT, they want to move cars. And it's also been my experience with DOT that they'll present several alternatives, but they will internally know that we want the one that moves most of the cars. And the only way to begin to resist that kind of pressure is with some very clear recommendations. And if anything concerns me about the whole area, it's the extent to which both of those roads divide up the area, and I'm convinced it can only get worse with a major transportation improvement, and I'm not going to stand in the way. I mean, I understand the importance of that as well, but I do think for any kind of goals toward mitigating that that division, whether it's pedestrian bridges over the top or something like that, the earlier those recommendations become specific, the better, because it's really hard once an environmental document's been accepted, they can no longer, that defines the property they're going to acquire, right? That's essentially what that environmental document says. And now you come back with a pedestrian underpass or something that would require more property, and they say, oh, sorry, our environmental document's already approved. So I just went through a big deal with this down in Stoughton, and believe me, it's really hard to change that after the environmental document, even if it's 6 more years before they put a shovel in the ground. Once they have an environmental document, they're very reluctant to modify it. So as specific as you're able to get with the assistance of traffic engineering to incorporate mitigation regarding the segmentation of the neighborhood. I mean, it's already bad, but it could get worse.
Commissioner Fernandez, thank you very much for those comments. Anything from others in regard to this question? I'm going to ask the same thing then. are people in harmony with what Commissioner Fernandez had to say? I see a couple of heads shaking. Could you, okay, it looks like people are in harmony with that, and Alder Heck has something to say. Alder Heck.
I really appreciate what Commissioner Fernandez had to say, but I also worry about the realities of state and city interactions, and that I think it's good to do what you were suggesting, but we have to understand that traffic engineering and engineering are going to have to negotiate with the state, and I won't say the state will ignore us, but it's always a possibility. So there needs to be some wiggle room somehow in whatever we come up with, while being forceful at the same time. I guess I don't know how that can be accomplished, but I assume that planning staff working with engineering and traffic engineering can figure out a way forward. But I do appreciate the flavor of what you're saying, and hopefully that will provide some influence.
Thank you, Alder. Any further input or thoughts about this question? Okay. Anything else about the plan that commissioners would like to comment on or provide, insights or direction? Seeing no raised hands, I'm going to ask staff, have you gotten what you were hoping for from the commission? Linda.
I think so. I mean, this has been a very fruitful discussion for us. We've learned, some important things that we need to consider as we move forward with revising the draft. Appreciate all the very specific comments. And we will take them all into consideration as we're revising and creating that complete draft plan. And if folks have anything else they want to share, we're always, always look forward to hearing from you too, through email if you'd like, or otherwise.
Okay, thank you, Linda. Commissioner Fernandez.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I hate to say one more quick thought. I think this area is impacted by the F-35 noise area, and I don't want to get into a big discussion of it, but is that correct? And will there be any discussion of noise mitigation plan?
Yeah, that was included, but go ahead. Linda, did you want to take that
Sorry. Actually, I think Dan has been more in
Dan.
touch with that, so we'll let.
Okay, very good. Dan.
Sure. Yes, so the area, a significant portion of the area is within the modeled EIS contours that of the F-35. So kind of without getting into a very long answer, the EIS modeled flight activity very, very simply, basically saying every flight, we're going to remove all local flight patterns so we can compare all the bases being considered in apples to apples. In doing so, I think there's a recognition that the quantity of flights was overestimated. And we're right now going through the Part 150 process, which is actually the federal funding to mitigate noise impacts inside those contours. That process is being run by Dane County Regional Airport. I am a member of the technical advisory committee as a representative of the city planning commission. I believe they are revising their flight estimates and revising the contours, the baseline contours. Those should be coming out sometime this fall. Will likely be a public meeting to present those, as well as potential alternatives. I want to say probably December, January timeframe. So relatively soon. Once those contours come out, we'll have a much better idea where sound impacts will be. Certainly the area will be impacted by sound, much as it is today. I think from us, the policy question is, to what extent is it going to be different from the current situation? I think what we've seen with development proposals, we are certainly encouraging soundproofing in new construction, particularly with affordable housing, where renters or owners may have less choice. You're watching the occupancy sensors and MMB with my screen, but yes, we could certainly, certainly encouraging people to soundproof or encouraging processes, new construction to be soundproofed. It certainly makes sense. And we certainly want to make sure that existing residents in the neighborhood are aware of the Part 150 process. So if they are eligible for that soundproof funding from the federal government, we can put them in touch and see how they get.
Thank you, Dan. Anything else? Not seeing any raised hands. Is there any business by members? Okay, then we will move to the secretary's report. Heather.
Thank you, Chair Zellers. Quick recap of the last council meeting. The council did move ahead with the Plan Commission's recommendations on all counts, several rezonings, the Ramish site being one of the more notable recommendations the Plan Commission had made. Looking forward to our October 3rd meeting. We will have a relatively long meeting due to many of the referrals from this evening, but I think I'll mention the highlights, some of which are on your agenda this evening and others that were originally scheduled for the 3rd. Hotel conversion at 3841 East Washington. That's hotel conversion to residential. And then a new hotel at 609 East Dayton. This is one that the Plan Commission has seen before, so a revised design for that proposal. The State of Wisconsin Investment Board redevelopment, 121 East Wilson, a 14-story building with over 300 residential units. And then also Dane County's landfill and sustainability campus, that rezoning will be before you on the 3rd. And finally, I'll mention one other at 5600 block of Schrader Road, a housing development that involves the demolition of 2 restaurant buildings on Schrader Road. And so I think that those are the main items for discussion likely on the 3rd. Looking forward then to the 24th. We have a new hotel, lots of hotels on upcoming agendas, 2403 East Springs Drive, and then a redevelopment, a relatively small housing project, 32 units on North Butler Street, downtown. And then finally, multi-building residential complex, 4205 Portage Road with nearly 500 new units proposed. So those will be before you on the 24th. Meanwhile, we do, as Chair Zellers mentioned, we do have a special meeting together next Thursday, September 29th, and we'll have a presentation that evening from CARPC. Steve Steinhoff, the director of CARPC, will present their regional plan framework for the greater Dane County region. And then we'll move into our own City of Madison zoning staff presenting potential changes to the family definition in our zoning ordinance. And then Kate Smith from the City Attorney's Office will be there as well to provide a quick overview again, sort of a refresher on the new demolition standards and how we've removed the consideration of proposed future uses. I'll follow up with an email to folks on that. So if you have any specific questions, you can send them to us in advance. We can prepare accordingly. I think that's it for the Secretary's report. Thanks so much for your time and really careful thought this evening. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Heather. Any further announcements from anybody? Seeing none, yes. Alder Heck.
Thanks. I just wanted to make sure that people were reminded of the social on Wednesday.
Thank you very much. Yes, yes. And I hope most people will be able to go. So thank you, Alder Heck. I'm looking for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Commissioner Cantrell. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Shepherd. And I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Okay, we are adjourned. Take care.